Good morning, Dawg Nation. I'm Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. We're presented today by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. And as you can see, we are a little bit different location than normal. I'm dressed differently than normal. This is one of those times we get a little dressed up. We get excited about the start of the football season. Obviously, Dawg Nation loves Georgia football and college football, but we're proud here to be partners as well with high school football when it comes to our friends from Score Atlanta and the Corky Kell Dave Hunter Classic, which you can watch on the Peachtree Sports Network, streaming with our friends at Atlanta News First. And this is the event each and every year where we say hello to the coaches, and some of the players will be involved in this, and also some of the other top players in the state of Georgia. Kind of one of the events that I look forward to because it's always the thing that signals that football is here. So we're here for that today, but the show, as you've known it, going to be very, very similar to what you're used to it being. We're going to talk, obviously, to Jon Stinchcomb here coming up in a little bit. John today going to give us a strong reaction to the commitment that Georgia added to its 2025 class on Friday night with the giant offensive tackle Juan Gaston. What does Juan bring to the table for Georgia? John's going to tell us about that. And speaking of Gaston, we'll actually get a chance to hear from him there today as well. Kind of a funny exchange regarding how it was that he knew he wanted to go to the University of Georgia. We'll get that. But to begin things here today, I told you this, I believe it was on Friday. One of my favorite things about fall camp and the build up to the start of the season, we hear this in whispers and rumors and rumblings and grumblings. We'll have more of those today, too, by the way, after some of you got a chance to see the practice on Sunday if you're a member of the Classic City Collective. But with all of this kind of rumor and innuendo, one of the things that sort of builds, at least narratively in our minds, is a fun battle for playing time. Folks fighting to perhaps become starters, folks fighting in some cases perhaps to hold on to those starting spots. This year's fall camp for Georgia, no different. In fact, one of the guys who seems to be spicing things up right now in a big way is one of the big five-star incoming freshmen to UGA. How close could he be to really breaking out this season? And what are the factors that will determine whether or not that happens? We're going to begin the show by talking about that today. Of course, I'm referencing KJ Bolden. All of that and more to come up. So it is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia, and it begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Pella Window and Door of Georgia, viewed to be the best.
Presented by DawgNation.com, this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
All right, coming up in a couple of minutes, we've got something really fun that we're going to do. I've got actually another, what I think is really fun announcement to make today about something we're going to invite all of you to participate in and a chance to hang out and have a good time with the folks around DawgNation, myself included. We'll do that with you here coming up in just a few minutes. Also, some of you got a chance to see Georgia practice on Sunday, and you came away, as typically happens, with some rumors and some suggestions about what was on display yesterday with our friends at the Classic City Collective. We'll give you a little bit on that here coming up in just a little bit there as well. Prior to that, though, I mentioned this on Friday. And by the way, if you're tuning in on video, you see us, we're live here at the Corky Kell Dave Hunter Classic Kickoff Luncheon prior to the start of the high school football season for us a couple of weekends from now. This is the event that begins all of that, and we're happy to be here, and we'll tell you more about that as we roll through our time here today. What I want to talk about right now, though, is, as I mentioned to you on, I think it was Friday, I love position battles at Georgia. I love a deep roster with a bunch of guys vying for their chance to be out there, earn a starting spot, earn playing time, and make themselves into a factor here for an upcoming season. And that's especially true when you kind of start mentioning some of the big freshmen in the mix and all of that. And I don't know that there's any freshman on the Georgia roster right now perhaps earning more buzz than the incoming safety, KJ Bolden, is here right now. Now, listen, we also kind of know that it's pretty common for Georgia players to be hyped to a very high degree when they first come into UGA. That's happened for years, and this year will be no different on that. We also know this, that as the Georgia roster has gotten deeper and better, I don't care even if you are an elite incoming freshman. I don't care if that is the case. It's seemingly becoming harder to kind of find your spot on the field because it's not like it was in 2016, 2017 when Smart was first getting going here, where there was plenty of playing time to be had. And perhaps Georgia was selling that as a major point to some of the recruits that it was bringing in. Now it's getting a little tougher. We even perhaps perceive a bit that sometimes this type of thing gets used against Georgia just a bit, that for a big-time player considering going to UGA, perhaps there's a whisper and a brush of negative recruiting where so-and-so coach from so-and-so program says, are you sure you want to go to UGA? Are you sure you want to be in that pressure cooker and in that deep battle for playing time? Because look at so-and-so. He didn't play as a freshman. Look at so-and-so. He didn't play as a freshman. That it's the kind of thing that sometimes gets used against Georgia in some respects. But there's also the belief sometimes that if a player is, as Kirby Smart has said before, if he's good enough, he's also old enough. And it's possible to skip to the front of the line when it comes to your chance to be out there on the field, just simply because of the fact that if your talent level wins out, then Georgia's going to acknowledge you with that opportunity. One of the guys that may be getting a chance to experience that here this year is the five-star incoming freshman KJ Bolden, a guy who media got a chance to see last week, reporting good things about. Plenty of whispers, what we heard from him back during the spring. We saw some of this on display during G-Day, that if Georgia really does have that five-star phenom who emerges this year, Bolden may very well be the guy that does that. But what does it take to actually have that happen? What does it take to actually emerge that way? Well, last week I had a chance to talk to someone who knows a little something about playing at Georgia and playing significant contributions as a freshman. That's the former quarterback Jake Fromm, who obviously joins us each and every week for our Kroger Fresh Take. And I asked Jake about the possibility that someone like Bolden could step up and play in a big way for Georgia here this year. Jake told us last week that for any player like this to emerge, it kind of comes down to a couple of things in order to be able to make that happen. This is what Jake Fromm said about KJ Bolden or any other freshman's chances of really breaking out and becoming the kind of phenom player that we all enjoy. This is what Jake said it takes to make sure that happens.
So from my experience and knowing Kirby, pretty well, I'd say, it comes down to two things. One, can you play? And then two, can I trust you?
Yeah.
A big thing for him is being able, hey, like you may be a great player, you may be the best player on the team, but you have to earn those reps and you have to earn that trust from your coaches to be in the right place at the right time doing the right thing. And that is a huge thing with Kirby and throughout the coaching staff is, can I trust you to do your job? And you can't forget about that. And these freshmen, they have to earn that, and it takes time to do that. And you may be the best player at your position, but if you can't showcase day in and day out that you know your job and you know your assignment, then it's going to be very tough to put you on the field.
I think that's such an important thing that Jake Fromm's talking about there, that obviously there's an athletic requirement to being the player that steps up and earns playing time as a freshman. But the truth is most of these players wouldn't be at Georgia if they didn't meet the athletic threshold required here. What Jake Fromm says, though, in addition to that, it's not just athletically being capable. You have also got to make sure that you understand everything this position requires. And for Georgia, especially in the defensive secondary, if we're talking about KJ Bolden, that becomes especially important, your ability to know your assignment, to understand what's required of not just you, but the defensive secondary that you're working in concert with, and how you contribute to all of that becomes such an important part of that. Now, we've also heard from Kirby Smart going back to SEC Media Days, then when it comes to these kinds of things, that perhaps KJ Bolden, the guy we're discussing here right now, might be ahead of even where another former terrific freshman, Malachi Starks, was at Georgia at this point in his progression, that Bolden might actually be ahead of Starks. And we understand what high praise that is, given the fact that Malachi Starks had the big interception against Oregon in Mercedes-Benz Stadium in his first college game, ironically the same place that Bolden will play his first college game coming up in a few weeks. And since then, Malachi has gone on to be one of the top players in college football, regardless of position. It certainly means something when Kirby Smart says that Bolden might be ahead of where Starks was, and he said that back during SEC Media Days. But how well is KJ doing in terms of meeting the two important pieces of criteria that Jake Fromm brings up there? Handling his business athletically, we know he can do that. Also handling his business cerebrally, understanding everything that's required of him. How well is KJ Bolden doing when it comes to all of that? Well, last week when Kirby Smart met with the media to kick off Georgia Fall Camp, he talked about that and so much more, the progression that he's seeing from KJ Bolden here right now.
Yeah, I don't think there's any pressure in terms of hype as a recruit. I mean, he may put that on himself, but we don't, because we don't pick kids and say, well, this guy's got pressure, this guy doesn't. I think we got to prepare him day to day with intensity. And each day is an opportunity for him to grow and get better. And sometimes freshmen, they can't rise to the occasion that number of times, and they have these off days because they've never had this intensity. He's going to be able to handle that well, number one, because of where he came from, the program he played in, but he's also a conscientious kid. So we're going to push him, and we're going to challenge him, and we're going to test him, because he'll certainly get tested in this schedule we have.
I think that's so interesting to hear that from Kirby Smart, and I think it's really interesting how well that lines up with what Jake Fromm was also saying there a moment ago, that athletically he wouldn't be here if he didn't, have those credentials. But in terms of being pushed, take it to the next level, to understand the assignments and really earn the trust of these Georgia coaches day in, day out during Georgia practice. That's really what it's all about. And perhaps, as I said a moment ago, demonstrating to other programs, other coaches, and even other recruits that Georgia's the kind of place that if you earn this opportunity, Georgia's the kind of place that if you win over the coaches with how you perform during fall camp, you will be then rewarded with your chance to enjoy plenty of playing time in your first year, and perhaps silencing some of that negative recruiting that might exist from those who say that doesn't happen at a place like Georgia. In fact, that's something that Jake Fromm talked more about last week on the program, the idea that Georgia can demonstrate this is the place where that kind of thing can happen, as long as the recruits themselves can demonstrate they are worthy of that opportunity. Here's more from Jake Fromm on that.
You got to kind of think from the coach's perspective, like the people that I'm putting on the field is an extension of myself. It's my name and my face on it, and I want to put a good product out there, one for myself, for the university, for the state, for DawgNation throughout. And I have to make sure that these guys are doing exactly what I want them to do, because if they don't, it comes back and it looks bad on me.
So really good stuff from Jake Fromm there. And by the way, if you missed anything from Jake when he was on with us, it was last Thursday all this came from. Go back to the DawgNation YouTube page. You can go back and see this or any of the other episodes of DawgNation Daily in recent days as we're getting you ready for the 2024 season. Now, let me shift gears to something else here briefly just for a moment. As I mentioned to kick things off here today, a lot of you got a chance to see some of the Georgia practice yesterday. I think this is a really cool and creative thing that Georgia has done. In fact, we've talked about this before, giving the members of the Classic City Collective, those who are paying, I believe it's $21 a month, their chance to get a little reward for their support of UGA, and got a chance to see that. And of course, people who are there and watching Georgia practice, there's going to be plenty of opportunity for them to say what they've seen. I've had a chance to hear from a few folks who had a chance to see there and be there yesterday. And I'm sure you've seen some of this yourself. So what is it we've heard here thus far? I heard there was a fight, which is pretty common for this time of year. Very, very hot. Tempers kind of flare up pretty quickly in a situation like that. I guess it was, from what I was told, I guess it was Jamal Jarrett doing battle with some of the Georgia offensive linemen. Listen, if you've ever gone to like an NFL training camp, which I've been to a lot, or sometimes the occasional Georgia practice there as well, there's nothing too weird at all about seeing hot players with the sun beating down on them getting a little aggravated with each other pretty quickly as they're also out there competing. And so kind of a fun thing for some fans to get their chance to see. What was also kind of cool based on what I've heard from the event here thus far is going back to something we talked about on Friday, the performance of Branson Robinson, in light of the fact that earlier this week, and we talked a lot about this on Friday's show, in light of the fact that Kirby Smart said that Branson Robinson will be kind of a full go for fall camp, and, on a little bit of, a pitch count in terms of how he gets back to football, but really being, trusted to get out there and kind of be sort of a full go during camp. It sounds like those who got a chance to see Branson during practice on Sunday, at least what I've heard, sounds like they were pretty impressed with what they saw. And the same way we kind of sort of wrapped up the early portion of Friday's show by saying this Georgia running back room might end up being a very interesting thing. Well, based on what some folks got a chance to see there on Sunday, it sounds like that is indeed the case, and it sounds like that Branson Robinson could be a much bigger part of this right now than I originally thought. pretty good stuff to consider when it comes to UGA on all of that. I'm sure many of you had your own experience based on who you heard or what you heard, and if you were there, maybe pop your thoughts there in the comment section, and we'll let some folks get a chance to gain their own knowledge about the sights and sounds of a really fun Georgia practice on Sunday, and a pretty creative way for Georgia to make some NIL dollars and incentivize some NIL giving by giving those fans a chance to be a part of a Georgia practice. My name is Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. We're presented today by Pella Window and Door, Georgia. We're happy to have you with us as I kind of try to stay out of the shadow here, where we are live here today. Fun day for us. It's the start of the season with our Corky Kell Dave Hunter Classic kickoff luncheon, a chance to preview a lot of the games we'll have for you coming up a couple of weekends from now on the Peachtree Sports Network, and, of course, streaming with our friends at Atlanta News First. Great collection of games, and obviously the coaches and some of the players involved in those games are here today, and also a special collection of some of the top recruits in Georgia also on hand for all of this here too. So stay close to DawgNation. We'll give you plenty of reaction to all of that. Jeff Sintel here going to be here today to interview some of the folks who are on hand, and I'll give you my own perspective on some of that there as well. Also want to say a thanks to our friends at Pella Window and Door of Georgia for making all this possible. You know, as I stand here and do the show, and as a way of kind of giving us some more light, I stand in front of a bunch of windows here. Now, let me tell you this. I don't know that these windows, obviously this is a fine hotel, but I don't know that these windows are quite as energy efficient as the ones that Pella Window and Door of Georgia is famous for, because I've got the sun beating through these windows. I'm essentially standing in a sauna here right now, but we want to be able to try to present something that looks okay on camera, so I'm willing to do that. But I'm just sort of thankful, though, that for those of you that have the Pella windows installed in your home, that you're dealing with a lot more energy efficiency. This time of year when it's so hot outside, you're keeping the air conditioning on the inside where it's supposed to be, keeping you cool and comfortable all summer long. And, of course, it also looks great on the outside there as well. The best way to take care of what's probably the most important thing in your life, the home that you live in, the best way to take the best care of all of that are with our friends at Pella Window and Door. So if it's time to upgrade your door, if it's time to improve your windows, it's time to have a consultation with one of those Pella experts about how you are able to get that done. You can go to PellaFGA.com/DawgNation to find out more about this, and let one of those Pella experts come out and visit you. You can go see them at their Experience Center in Duluth and really learn why, if you want to perhaps save money on your energy bills or perhaps eventually improve your curb appeal, which could improve your resale value, why installing Pella windows and doors is the right thing for you to do. That's the great opportunity to do that here right now. They can also tell you about great savings there as well. Pella Window and Door of Georgia is truly viewed to be the best, and for a long time here around DawgNation, that's been the case. So please find them online. PellaofGA.com/DawgNation. If you're watching a video, you also see the phone number on your screen. You can give them a call today and learn everything that Pella Window and Door of Georgia's got for you. Pella Window and Door of Georgia, viewed to be the best. Of course, great to have them as a part of DawgNation Daily here today. Also, a couple of other things here just for a moment. We're going to get Jon Stinchcomb here in a little bit. Good stuff with Jon on a big commitment that Georgia added on Friday and so much more. But prior to that, though, and before we get into our Around the Doghouse here in a moment, too, let me tell you about something really fun that's about to take place here at DawgNation. I think you're going to really enjoy this, and we're going to invite everybody to sort of be a part of this. We're doing a really fun thing with with our friends at the Finish Long Drink. We're calling this our DawgNation Finish Long Drink Sip and Swing. It's a great golf outing with me and some of the maybe at least another personality here from around DawgNation, and of course plenty of beverages from the Finish Long Drink there as well. And we want you to register for your chance to win this great experience. We're going to be really creative how we do this, whether it's on the X platform, formerly known as Twitter, or on Instagram. We're simply going to ask you to post a photo of yourself enjoying some Finish Long Drink. The truth is many of you share this with me all the time, whether it be out at a golf course, which many of you do, or around the pool, or at the beach. We've seen plenty of that here this summer there as well. You're enjoying all kinds of varieties of the Finish Long Drink, the traditional in the blue can, the peach-flavored version. You've got the pineapple-flavored version that's out there now. We've seen so many of you enjoying all of that. And so you're already sharing these photos on a regular basis with me anyway. But now for doing that, you're going to get a chance to be a winner here too. When you share that photo by tagging DawgNation, tagging the long drink, and using the hashtag Sip and Swing. That's SIP, Sip and Swing. Hashtag Sip and Swing. you're going to be registered for your chance to win a tremendous golf outing with me, a DawgNation personality, coming up on September 25th. We're going to be at the Iron Horse Golf Club that day for a wonderful golf outing with plenty of fun. And listen, you'll be guaranteed to win because I'm not very good at golf, but I do love playing, especially when the finished long drink is flowing. And on this particular day, that's exactly what's going to happen. So the registration period is open now and will remain open between now and August 30th. So go to Instagram, go to the X platform, use the hashtag Sip and Swing, tag DawgNation, tag the long drink, show us a photo of yourself enjoying some finished long drink, and that'll be your entry to be a part of a great golf outing with DawgNation and the finished long drink. So we'll be telling you more about this, but jump on board, register for your chance to win, and maybe we'll get a chance to play golf with each other coming up next month. Should be a great experience. Of course, this is only to legal residents in the United States of America, 18 years of age and older there on that. So good stuff when it comes to the finished long drink and our Sip and Swing golf outing taking place here coming up in the month of September. All right, before I get Jon Stinchcomb, I also want to get ready to go around the doghouse here for a moment. It's poured today by our friends at Dr. Pepper. And as I mentioned, Georgia got some really good recruiting news on Friday as the four-star offensive tackle Juan Gaston announced his pledge to UGA. And he was very creative in how he did that. I know Jeff Sentell's got some great stuff for you at DawgNation in terms of the changing of the shirts and the kind of the swerve that he did. We've said before, we have a very high tolerance for drama when it comes to recruiting decisions. We think any recruit that sort of brings in the theatrics on that is A-okay for us. In fact, you're seeing some of that on your screen here right now. That to me is really fun. But after Gaston put all this on display at the ceremony there at his high school, Westlake High School, Juan also joined us on DawgNation Friday evening there as well, talking about how it was that he knew he was going to go to Georgia and the very, I guess, modern circumstances with which that decision became obvious to him. You can see this full interview for yourself on the DawgNation YouTube page going back to Friday night. But how about a little bit here of Juan Gaston on the decision to choose Georgia and exactly what was it that led him to make that decision? Let's hear from Juan Gaston on that right now.
What did this decision come down to, man? What was the reason why, after a bunch of shirts and a bunch of wardrobe changes, you were a dog?
Just came down to who I was closer with, what I have with the players on the team and some of the coaches.
When did you know? I heard this was a tough week for you trying to figure this out.
I knew last night around 2 o'clock in the morning when I was on the game.
You were playing the game?
Yeah.
You were playing NCAA?
I was.
Who were you playing with? Tell me about that, man.
I was playing NCAA with my teammate, D-line, Sekou Peters, and that right guard, Anthony Bateman. We was just on the game, chopping it up, and I just talking in my head and chose a school.
A lot of Georgia fans have been waiting for a long time for the return of the EA Sports College Football video game. We've all had our own, excitement about that, and many of you have seen, as we showed you on camera the other day, the really fun experience I had when Xbox sent me the specially designed UGA console, and I've had a great time with that. Our family's loving that here right now. But I think the other thing that makes Georgia fans really excited about the EA Sports College Football video game is the fact that all of a sudden now it's becoming fodder for Georgia to win more recruiting battles as Gaston plays that game with some of his high school teammates, and they're, as he says, sort of chopping up there at 2 a.m. The decision about where to go to college becomes obvious. And by the way, Gaston wasn't playing with Georgia. I believe he told Jeff Sentell he was playing with Penn State, which is kind of ironic because Penn State could use some offensive linemen the caliber of Juan Gaston. But nonetheless, it's playing that game, talking with friends. Gaston becomes obvious that Georgia's the place that he wants to be. And so for Georgia fans who already like the EA Sports College Football video game, now they even have even more reasons to like that as the Georgia Bulldogs get some good news in recruiting there on that front. And we'll make that Around the Doghouse, poured today by our friends at Dr. Pepper. Now, listen, I tell you what, we are entering into what I sort of think of as sort of the Dr. Pepper time of year. We're kind of moving into that moment when you start seeing a lot more of those Fansville commercials on TV. You start seeing the Dr. Pepper sponsorships and some of the big college football games that take place, including so many of the postseason games at the end of the season. And I love that from our friends at Dr. Pepper. But there is still some more time to enjoy summer with Dr. Pepper as well before Fansville season fully gets here. In fact, many of you are doing that when it comes to the Dr. Pepper Creamy Coconut, Dr. Pepper Creamy Coconut Zero Sugar. We heard from some folks in our comment section there on Friday that we heard from some folks there on Friday that they've been trying it, they've been loving it, they've been enjoying it, and that is one of the great things that I love to see. Obviously, around here, we give our pitch for various products and things like that. Obviously, that's how we, keep the lights on and feed our families and things like that. But when some of you then tell me how much you enjoy it and how true it turned out to be, that it was a good experience for you, I'm always really, really happy about all of that. And so I'm very happy to see so many of you enjoying the Dr. Pepper Creamy Coconut, the Dr. Pepper Creamy Coconut Zero Sugar here right now. So if you have not tried that yet, or if you just want to get stocked up on your favorite version of Dr. Pepper ahead of the upcoming college football season, you can go to wherever you're doing your grocery shopping, your local Kroger or wherever else. Pick up some of that Dr. Pepper Creamy Coconut, Dr. Pepper Creamy Coconut Zero Sugar, and have a great time with all of that ahead of the upcoming college football season. And it's so great to have Dr. Pepper pouring around the doghouse for us here today. All right, I'm going to tap dance here a little bit. We're going to get Jon Stinchcomb here coming up in just a moment. In fact, Jon is here. So we're going to do something a little bit different for our cool down a little bit later on. Kaylee Mansell going to step in for me so I can step into the ballroom to be ready for the Corky Kell Dave Hunter Classic Lunch. We'll talk more about that here in just a little bit. So if you're watching live on video, you'll get the same experience you always get. You'll just get it led by Kaylee and not me. But for now, on the big commitment of Juan Gaston, I do mean big when you look at his size and everything else going on around Georgia football, let's get ready to talk to Jon Stinchcomb here today on DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
Say hello to Jon Stinchcomb here right now. Always happy to have Jon's expertise, especially in a day in which Georgia gets a big offensive line commit. And Jon, in the case of Gaston, I do mean big. This is a giant of a man, and it kind of keeps that legacy going of Georgia adding players of kind of this size dimensions. I mean, it's really pretty remarkable. Obviously, I'm sure you'll tell us that to be that big makes it very, very tough to have an edge rusher. You just get absorbed so easily by the block. Like, how much does Gaston's size help him kind of become the kind of player that Georgia wants him to be once he arrives here on campus?
Well, it certainly helps. It helps guys that are able to utilize their size. And you watch Juan play, and he knows how to use that mass that he carries. Watching him and some of his highlights and some of his film, he reminds me of Xavier Truss, a guy who uses his frame to bully undersized players, but also is able to stand in front and mirror those that are a little more athletic. So I think it's a testament to the recruiting for Coach Smart. A lot has been made of national recruiting, but with Cortez and now Juan, two guys in the Atlanta and suburban Atlanta area that are highly sought after across the nation, he's able to keep it home. And for Juan, big man, very big, just jumps out immediately, but is able to move around and utilize that frame. A lot of guys think that, all I need to do is just be big. And what they miss out on is the ability to move. And when you're able to combine those, that's what separates you from the rest. It's a lot of guys can either move, but they don't have the size, or vice versa. They're huge, but not very mobile. And there's only a few guys that can move and utilize the frame the way Juan does.
I've also said this in the aftermath of Georgia getting Juan Gaston, that we've seen Georgia win so many recruiting battles, and so many aspects of this program are obviously, running at a very efficient level. That's going to be the natural case when you're winning national championships, which Georgia obviously has. But, Jon, I think you can make a case that the thing that Georgia consistently perhaps does better than anything else is the way that it always makes sure it's got enough offensive line depth. One of the things we've talked about in the show in recent days is the notion that by the time this fall camp comes to an end, Georgia may have at least 8 offensive linemen that would feel okay about playing, and perhaps maybe even eventually more than that. But I think at least 8 is not a small number when you think about the natural attrition that occurs during a season. You don't get that kind of offensive line depth by taking a year off when it comes to offensive line recruiting. And a year ago, we had that stretch in July last year where Georgia just knocked off, commit after commit after commit. And because of what Georgia signed when it comes to its offensive line a year ago, would have perhaps been easy to assume that maybe coming back and doing something like that again the following year would be a little bit more difficult, but Georgia just doesn't seem to accept that. Now, listen, they may not get everybody. They seems right now may not get the 5-star David Sanders, but they're going to get plenty. You mentioned, the young man from Parkview a moment ago, Cortez. They're going to get plenty of guys that can come in and be a part of those, contributions for depth in future years. And when you look at a Georgia program that does so much so well, the way in which it goes out and gets more offensive linemen each and every year, that may be the thing it does best of all.
Sure. And we live in an era of the transfer portal, right, where you can find players to add to your roster. Let me tell you what you can't find. You can't find a high-end offensive lineman that's available and ready in the transfer portal. You've got developmental guys. You've got guys that may not have lived up to their potential in some of the bigger programs, or guys that have exceeded their potential from a smaller program, but those are few and far between. So what Georgia has prioritized is we need to find these guys coming out of high school, both large but also athletic, and be able to develop them. That's offensive line is different than most positions. Defensive line is close, but offensive line is unique in that it takes time. Very few guys can come right off the bus out of high school and be ready to play at an SEC caliber level. And what Georgia wants is to be able to compete for national championships on an annual basis. And that means bringing in a healthy crop of offensive linemen year after year after year. And Coach Cyril's and Coach Smart's entire staff have prioritized it. And it's evident in the way that Georgia continues to A, put out great talent into the NFL from the offensive line, and B, replace them with equally or potentially as equally talented players that have been cultivated and grown in the Georgia program.
You mentioned this a moment ago. I don't know if we've had a chance to talk about this. As a former Parkview Panther yourself, how happy were you to see a guy like Cortez Smith sign up to be a part of this Georgia 2025 class, at least making a pledge to this Georgia 2025 class a few days ago, kind of keeping that Parkview legacy at UGA alive?
Yeah, well, Parkview orange is the only orange that I love because every other orange is pretty putrid in my assessment. So I'm always happy to see, one, Parkview alums going to the University of Georgia, and two, especially when they're offensive linemen. I think Cortez is probably the most recent offensive lineman since maybe Zeb McKenzie coming out of Parkview, and that's been almost 2 decades. So we were overdue to get some of the Panther pride being represented in Georgia.
I'll also say this on Cortez, one more thing before we change the subject. John, the other thing I really like about him is, and I'm not sure even how much you may have realized this, but he was starting as a center, as a freshman for Parkview going back a couple of years ago. And to me, for a program like that, playing as tough a schedule as you can play, obviously a heritage team in the state of Georgia and the Atlanta area for sure, to be able to lean on a freshman and have that, Eric Godfrey, who was coach at the time, is here today as the North Gwinnett coach, and he certainly has talked plenty about the fact that they felt great about putting him out there as 14 years old, however old a freshman would be. If you want a really good idea about how a guy might be able to translate to the college level, not a guarantee, of course, but a pretty good idea of how it possibly could translate, the fact that he was already playing at the time was 7A football in Georgia when he was a freshman in high school, that's a pretty remarkable accomplishment.
Absolutely is. And I think it was that year or maybe the year after where Parkview puts out double-digit numbers, close to 15 guys go to D1 programs across the country. Not all SEC caliber, but if you just look at that roster, and it was not deplete of talent. So for him to come in early and contribute, I think is a testament to his ability, and obviously has grown since that freshman year. But a guy that you circled early on to say, there's a lot of potential here, and excited to see it because Parkview, their program has really established itself as one of the threats each year, and put together a lot of talent that produces at the next level.
So, John, yesterday, some Georgia fans got a chance to see Georgia practice. The Classic City Collective members were invited to watch on Sunday, and I just think this is a really cool idea. The one thing I've been kind of sort of pounding my fist on the table about for quite some time, not just for Georgia, but for all of college athletics, is that if you want to really raise as much NIL money as possible, you got to try to find a way to incentivize giving the way that it's previously been incentivized for folks kind of donating to the Hartman Fund or what's now become the McGill Society, or just sort of regular traditional college athletics giving. Over the course of years, that's been incentivized in a number of ways. Years ago, there were some tax benefits. I don't think those quite exist at the same level anymore, but years ago, that was the thing. You've always gotten sort of priority seating, or, if you give enough, extra pats in the back. Sometimes you get your name on buildings, things like that. There's always been, in other words, a lot of incentivizing of what we sort of think of as traditional giving. In the early days of NIL, I don't know that there was as much of that. But saying, hey, if you'll give us $21 a month, you can come and watch a Georgia practice near the start of our fall camp. John, that seems like to me a pretty good deal for both sides here. And I think an example of Georgia being pretty creative with how it's going to do some of its NIL fundraising. Do you agree with that?
Yeah, you know what fans want? They want access, always. And when you can offer a unique, catered experience, I think fans jump at those opportunities. And obviously with Classic City Collective, it's both and. Both you get to help the team and recruit some of the best players across the country, and you get access that otherwise would be restricted. Not many folks get the chance to watch training camp as teams get ready. And I know at the NFL level, usually those practices are packed, whether it's Falcons or otherwise. And so for unique access, I think fans jump at that chance, and they want to see what it looks like. What are some of these players that we've heard so much about? They want that first opportunity to go back to their water cooler at work and be able to brag about what they saw from Carson Beck or Michael Williams or who that next great is that they'd circled that they wanted to pay attention to. So I think you continue to look at ways to reward those that are helping the program, if you will. And in the day and age that we live now, being able to stay competitive on an NIL front, it matters. You have to be able to at least stay competitive and then lean back on the fact that Georgia is the program the premier program everyone else is shooting for. So in addition to development of talent, in addition to playing for championships, Georgia has been and will continue to need to be competitive in that NIL front. To do that, you have to incentivize folks to give.
So let me ask you this. Now, this may be a little late for our Classic City Collective friends, but I believe the McGill Society folks will see practice this upcoming Saturday. So as a former player, as a guy who's been on a lot of practice fields, tell me how you would watch practice, because one of the things you see is a lot of fans who go to something like this. Now, Georgia doesn't necessarily want them doing this, but they're going to do it anyway. They're going to come back and sort of tell folks, I've heard from people who've been there, they're trying to recite what they saw, but eyewitness accounts aren't always the most reliable thing. Sometimes people have a tendency to sort of, I think misunderstand the facts. In fact, if you're watching like an offensive and a defensive lineman battling during a rep, if you're not careful, you could wrongly assume the wrong person won the rep, just depending on what you're looking at there. So as a former player who's obviously watching practice different than I would, for those who either got that experience on Sunday or may get that experience coming up for Georgia, how would you advise someone to watch a Georgia practice?
Yeah, well, first and foremost, I wouldn't be too concerned what order players are going in individual drills. I see that reported time and time again, whether it's from reporters or from fans that got to go to games of like, well, we saw in this individual drill, here was the order in which they were presented. At this time in camp, usually it's your veterans that get to go first because they know the drills more often than not better than some of the younger players. When you get into team drills, I think that's what's most competitive. When you're doing individual drills, I think you're looking for development of specific things. I know a number of times for the players, they're focused on specific techniques and specific points of emphasis for that day's practice. And it may not look all that clean to a fan's perspective, but they're unaware that, in this drill, we're focused on X, Y, and Z more so and how it fits a bigger picture. So I think ultimately for fans, when you get to team drills, I think those matter. I think you're counting wins and losses. In the individual drills, obviously you want to see guys win more often than not, but you can't put too much weight in some of those things. That the intention of all those individual drills is to work on specific skills that then translate. So in my opinion, what matters most are those the competitive drills, the 11-on-11, the inside drill, even 7-on-7 for some of the outside players. You get a good gauge, but it's not quite the same as when everything can be thrown at you. So, for example, if I'm a safety and I know it's pass scale, what's the only thing I have to worry about? I only have to worry about routes. I don't have to worry about my run assignments in these given plays. But yet you get on 11-on-11 and all that changes. So, again, to the fans that do get that access, enjoy those first parts, be able to garner some information about where a player is and whether they flash or not. But what's most important are those competitive drills at the end of the practice.
One of the things I talked about before you joined us was my excitement that someone like KJ Bolden, the 5-star incoming safety, could perhaps be in line for some early playing time and maybe even eventually a starter, perhaps even from the word go, possibly. Obviously, for someone who does what I do for a living, the notion of a freshman phenom, of a breakout star from the highly recruited ranks, that's always going to be a lot of fun. But, John, I also think there's a really important football value for Georgia, that what we already think of as a really deep and talented roster, if you could add another game-ready player from the ranks of your incoming freshmen, and if that guy is potentially as dynamic as Bolden could be, well, to me, that's a huge value add for Georgia overall. I played a clip a little earlier of Jake Fromm kind of talking about, not just for Bolden specifically, but for all these types of freshmen, about kind of what it takes to be a guy that earns the coach's trust early in the season. I was hoping you might talk a little bit more about that as we wrap up our conversation of whether it's KJ Bolden or whether it's somebody else. Like, what does it take to sort of jump to the front of the line and, be a guy a little bit like what Malachi Starks was a couple of years ago that earns that trust right away?
Yeah, and it's going to be who can play next to Malachi, right? So I had a coach tell me at one time, to be able to get on this field, it takes ability. And said, I'm not talking about athletic ability. I'm talking about three things. I'm talking about availability, coachability, and accountability. So for KJ Bolden, obviously being available for practice, being able to get the lessons that he needs to advance his game, to be able to contribute early, it matters. So staying healthy this camp for all these guys is huge, but especially for a player that has that athletic ability and that potential, but needs those reps, needs to earn that trust, and that comes with coachability. So the ability for him to learn from the mistakes that he's going to make and has probably made already in not only spring ball, but also now in training camp. How quickly can you adjust and learn from other people's mistakes, learn in the film room, learn from what the coach is telling you. And then that third piece is accountability, the ability for us to put you on that field, and we trust that you're going to get the job done. KJ Bolden, athletic ability is not the question, right? I mean, we all know there are certain players that come to Athens that are physically gifted and have the skills. It's a matter of developing and being able to contribute in the system. This isn't a one-on-one sport. This is a team game, and we need you to be able to do the job that we're asking you on any given play. So what we've seen in years past, I think specifically to some of the younger linebackers last year with Dumas Johnson and his injuries at times, there were opportunities for young players. That entire linebacker room was super athletic, but when you watch film, for some of the younger players, it was that first step, that first half step in the wrong direction, or that pause when you've already seen your keys to go ahead and trigger, and it puts you a half step behind. And because of their athleticism, they're able to recover. But that accountability is being able to trust your eyes and trust your coaching, that when you see something, when you know your assignment, that you can automatically trigger and not just rely on your athletic ability to recover. This is a league where too many guys are talented to where if you're that half step or step behind, that's a step too much. So for KJ or any of these younger players, it's the accountability. How much can we trust you when we put you on the field to execute the assignment that we're asking of you?
John, great stuff. Appreciate your time here today as part of DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia. And each week we discuss all these things. Gets us that much closer to the start of the 2024 season. I know we're both excited about that. We appreciate your time. I'll look forward to seeing you back here very soon again on DawgNation Daily, presented by Pella Window and Door of Georgia.
I always enjoy being on, BA. And let me tell you, it looks sharp. That Torquay Kell is privileged to have you there. So looking good, and go Dogs.
Thank you, John. I appreciate that.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
And with that, we'll get ready to transition to cruising around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean here today. Now, I'm dressed up. It's almost like a formal night on the cruise, getting ready for a nice dinner, although with the sun beating through this glass here, I'm not quite as relaxed and comfortable as I would be for a typical Royal Caribbean cruise vacation. But in April of 2025, we're going to be kicked back. We're going to be relaxed. We're going to be enjoying ourselves on board Utopia of the Seas. Perhaps you've heard me mention a thing or two about that. It's the ship that we're going to be on for our DawgNation cruise, and it's the newest of all the Royal Caribbean cruise ships. Let me tell you what I love about it. First of all, I love the fact that it's in Port Canaveral. That's a drivable port for me, really easy from where I am. In fact, standing right here, not too far from Truist Park, hop in the car. I could be there in just a matter of hours, and I could be settled in and getting ready to enjoy myself there. Each and every one of the Utopia of the Seas itineraries also includes a stop off at Perfect Day Coco Cay. You know I like that. And I love the fact that our friend Jessica Slater right now can get you ready for whether it's Utopia of the Seas prior to our DawgNation cruise, you want a kind of a early experience to get you ready for that, or as so many folks have done, we have sold so many of these staterooms already. So many folks have done, being a part of what we're going to be doing with Royal Caribbean and Utopia of the Seas. Jessica Slater getting you ready for all of that right now. If you go to DawgNationCruise.com, you can find out more of the details. If you're watching on video, you can also see Jessica's contact information. You can reach out to her there. But check out DawgNationCruise.com for more on all of that. All right, let's get ready to give you a couple of cruises around the SEC stories here. Then we're going to bring on Kaylee Mansell, at least for our video folks. She's going to take you home when it comes to our R.S. Andrews cool down. But let me begin with this. ESPN report yesterday, the leakage of the notice of allegations and notice infractions to Michigan stemming from the Connor Stallion sign stealing. The headline here is going to end up being that Sharon Moore is kind of caught up in this. He's accused of a level 2 violation, obviously the most serious allegations, kind of going the way of other Michigan staffers, including head coach Jim Harbaugh. And look, people make a big deal about this because it's going to be kind of a cloud hanging over Moore as he begins his coaching tenure at Michigan. But for me, this is a little bit different. What you read at ESPN.com about this pretty much confirms everything that most people believe to be true back last season. In other words, we knew then what we know now. Michigan cheated. And no one seems to really care about that. There wasn't any kind of appetite for any kind of serious punishment for them then. I don't believe it exists now. But it's the kind of thing that if you're a Georgia fan, a team that could have won the national championship, or frankly, any other team that could have been in the college football playoff, Florida State fans, folks like that. This is worth noticing here, that the NCAA had no desire to step in on this at the time, even though they had reason to believe it was true. And for a Michigan program who likes to sort of fancy itself as better than others, sort of a fancy pants academic school in a league, the Big Ten, that they would say has a little bit different motivation than the SEC often has. Well, a year ago, Michigan had a chance to prove just how much personal integrity as an organization it has. It chose not to do that. It could have self-imposed violations a year ago if it really did value integrity and doing the right thing as much as the lip service they paid to that over the years. Well, given the chance to show us they really believe what they've said for a long time, they proved themselves to be total hypocrites. And that's the kind of thing that I don't think any of us should forget anytime soon. Tennessee stays hot in recruiting here right now. Faizon Brandon is a 5-star quarterback for the class of 2026, and he's now a Tennessee commit. The Vols, in particular at the quarterback position, have been on quite a run when it comes to quarterback recruiting. And I'm reminded of something I believe I said on Friday's show. That if you look at what Georgia's done against Tennessee in the Josh Heupel era, it's been domination, but I would say it stopped short of being total obliteration, because this is still a Tennessee team that, because of a fairly well-organized NIL structure and the fact that they're doing okay in winning games other than against Georgia, they do remain a factor here. And Josh Heupel, who obviously has an offense that receivers have enjoyed playing in, other than the big year for Hendon Hooker in 2022, Heupel hasn't really quite found sort of his star quarterback other than that, the one nice year for Hooker. With the quarterback recruiting they're doing right now, including Nico Iamaleava for the upcoming season, this could be the year in which Heupel finally has a quarterback that can maybe fully operate in the offensive system that Heupel wants to run. Tennessee kind of remaining a factor here. They're sort of on the fringe of playoff contention for this upcoming year, and perhaps a little bit more of a factor in recruiting than some of Georgia's other SEC rivals are for the moment. Speaking of rivals, of course, the rival we hate more than anything, the lousy stinking Gators, and what is a pivotal season for Florida, they get some bad news to kick things off. Montrell Johnson, the running back who came with Billy Napier from Louisiana Lafayette and who has been the Gators' leading rusher the last 2 seasons, including over Trevor Etienne last year, suffers a knee injury near the beginning of fall camp and had to have like a little bit of a arthroscopic surgery of some kind. Still expected to be ready when the season begins against Miami, and I guess sort of being treated day to day here. But for a Florida team that can really afford no bad news, this is clearly some bad news here right now. Their leading rusher kind of uncertain status. And given the fact there is no Trevor Etienne there anymore, this becomes potentially a little bit troubling for the Gators. Also keep this in mind. The Billy Napier's got 2 straight losing seasons to begin his career at Florida. There was a note at CBSSports.com, I believe Dennis Dodd had this the other day. The last time Florida kept a coach after 2 straight losing seasons, you have to go all the way back to the 1940s for that. So pretty obvious this is a season which it's either have a winning record or get fired. And for Billy Napier, already playing an incredibly tough schedule, now potentially having to deal without his leading rusher to start that schedule, at least the possibility of that. Perhaps a concern for Florida. One more note, and ironically enough, it's also a Georgia rival. And speaking of hot recruiting streaks, Auburn continues to be on one of those right now. Jarrett Smith, 4-star defensive lineman out of the outstanding Thompson program in Allister, Alabama. He commits to Auburn over the weekend, giving the Auburn, I believe, 5 commits in 7 days, many of them highly rated. Some of them, battles one head-to-head over Alabama. Right now, Hugh Freeze doing some very good things on the recruiting trail. And some of that NIL money that the previous coach, Brian Harsin, was not getting a chance to use, it seems like that budget's fully operational for Hugh Freeze right now. And at least at the moment, he's putting that to good use. We'll make that cruising around the SEC courtesy of Royal Caribbean. Obviously, we'll get ready to say goodbye to all of you here today. We'll forego our golden shoe for right now just because of the fact that we're on remote, and that becomes a little bit difficult. We'll also throw our Gator hater number up there on the screen for you right now and remind you that it's always a good day to think about Georgia and its long winning streak against those lousy, stinking Gators. And we love the fact that number keeps on going up and up and up. And with that in mind, I'm going to get ready to bring in my good friend, Kaylee Mansell. Kaylee, of course, did a great job for a couple of weeks while I had to be away from work, and she's going to do a great job here right now. Kaylee, I'm going to get ready to both literally and figuratively kind of pass the baton to you for the R.S. Andrews cool down. You and Cody Chafin's back there at the studio going to handle all of that. But before I do, obviously I know you enjoy being a part of this Corky Kell Dave Hunter Classic as much as I do. This kickoff luncheon, a big part of our start of the season. How excited are you about seeing all these coaches and players back here together today?
Well, this is where it all really begins, and this high school football season, in my mind, is going to be different than the ones that we've done in the past because there's no 7A anymore. So the regions get bigger, it gets a lot more competitive, but the spirit of the Corky Kell luncheon, like I said, it's really where it all begins, and you can't help but be excited seeing all the players and coaches walk in, having their time with the media. So I'm excited for what's to come.
Well, I'm excited about that too. I'm going to give you the microphone here. I'll give you the headphones, and you can roll through the rest of it.
All right, in just a second, we're going to do our R.S. Andrews cool down. But for now, that'll wrap up DawgNation Daily. We're so happy to have you here and happy to be able to take the mic from Brandon Adams. And on video, time now for the R.S. Andrews cool down. R.S. Andrews, the one you turn to for your air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric needs. They'll show up on time, do the work that's promised. For the price that's promised, you can trust them on all of that. Let me get my headphones on so I can hear Cody, and we'll go ahead and get started.
Yeah, it's been on everybody who is giving us some comments here. Gerald Harmon says or Doug Rayburn says he's getting ready to watch Andrew Smart and the Georgia Little League team. Kaylee, does it surprise you how good Andrew is at baseball?
No, not at all. If anything, I would expect greatness and for him to be elite. The fact that he is the ace pitcher, the number 2 hitter, tells you everything that you need to know. And this Georgia team wasn't necessarily supposed to be the front runner for this regional, but they keep fighting, keep making their way back. So I hope we see Andrew Smart and Georgia and Williamsport this year.
Looking at DawgNation.com, seeing DT talking about Coach Larry Campbell at Lincoln County as we talk about high school football. Garrison Hurst, he's another one mentioned there from Lincoln County. So a Love the high school football talk. Who have you seen any of these? You got a lot of big-time teams that are going to be arriving here behind you, right?
Yeah, soon we're going to hear from all the teams, but I did want to give an updated schedule for what our Corky Kell Dave Hunter Classic will look like this year. You can watch it on the Peachtree Sports Network. Wednesday's games will feature LaGrange versus Douglas Atlanta at 4:30, Kell versus North Atlanta at 7:30. Our Thursday matchups will be Dunwoody versus South Paulding, and then West Forsyth versus Prince Avenue Christian, a school that has never played in the Corky Kell before. Friday's games will be Hebron Christian and Therrell, Cass versus Callaway at 5, Rome versus Creekside at 8. Rome, Creekside, two teams that dominate this event every year, and I'm excited to watch them go head-to-head. And then, of course, Saturday's games will be at Mercedes-Benz Stadium, the first game being Brookwood and Walton, then Houston County and Alpharetta, McEachern and North Gwinnett, and then the night will wrap up with the game that I think everybody's talking about throughout this entire week, and that's Cedar Grove versus Douglas County. That's our Corky Kell Dave Hunter schedule, and we hope that you tune in to not only support all of Georgia high school football, but our very own Brandon Adams, who's going to be on the call for a lot of these games.
Yeah, Tori Ensley shouting out Douglas County. So we'll see what everybody. Douglas County has been, it's a program that's been around for a long time, and it's been relevant for a long time, but really last few years has really kind of climbed up with some of these big-time recruits.
Absolutely. And then we do have our Mr. Football 2024 watch list, including some names that I know a lot of you know. The big one, of course, being Juju Lewis, who actually just reclassified so that he could enroll into USC earlier. He's going to be at the top of that list. And then you've got Luke Nickel, the quarterback from Milton, who won the 7A state championship last year. He's a Miami commit. Some other names you might recognize on this list are C.J. Wiley, Josh Petty, Justice Terry, Travis Smith Jr., UGA commit Todd Robinson, Tay Harris out of Cedartown, and Jaden Perlotti is also on this list. So a bunch of big names to watch for the Mr. Football 2024 watch list.
DT on DawgNation.com says, don't let Rusty call 3 games outside in the heat again. These first few weeks for you guys are brutal in the heat because, especially playing during the day, you get these 3 o'clock kickoffs, man. It's hot.
Do not feel bad. A lot of the press boxes now are air conditioned and are luxury state of the art. Do not feel bad for either of those two.
And so give us this. So the games start next week, right? So we are here. Like high school football season is happening.
Yeah, this is the premier kickoff event. It's one of the biggest in the country for all of high school football. It really is the blueprint and the standard for what everybody else does. There's nothing bigger than the Corky Kell Dave Hunter Classic. But, yeah, it starts next Wednesday, August 14th. It's like the season's over, and then you blink, and it's right back here. But I'll always have a special place in my heart for high school football. This is where I got started, and seeing these young kids and their excitement for the game. And some people aren't going to go on to play collegiate football, but the sense of community that high school football has, and it brings people together. It's refreshing, and it's definitely different from college football now that college football is becoming more and more like the NFL. I like being at the high school level for sure.
Matt Rukavina saying, it's summer here in Texas. It's not nearly as hot as it is there. 103 and an underpass underneath an overpass season. I can attest to that. I tried to take a walk around the hotel in Dallas while we were there just to go up see Dealey Plaza and do the thing. It's a different kind of just wear you out just from walking around heat. So kudos to Matt Rukavina for dealing with all of that.
Yeah, I think, too, the first 3 days, of course, we're outside, but you know that last day is going to be in Mercedes-Benz Stadium, so you just deal with what you deal with those first 3 days because you know you got the Benz on Saturday that is climate-controlled.
Taking a look at some of the other comments. Thank you guys for hanging out with us. Macon was hot. Philip Wells says hot AF yesterday. We'll let you fill in the blanks there. Appreciate that. I love, everybody. We got some great high school football on the YouTube side going on. Everybody bragging about their small hometowns, and that's the one thing that's so cool about high school football. And we talk so much about there's so many transfers now, and we talk about the big time recruits, but there's still nothing that beats. I got to go with Jeff Sentell down to Manchester to talk to Justice Terry last week, and you just get around those small town high school football stadiums. There's something special when you got folks showing up who, their kids hadn't been in school for 20 years and they still come to every game on a Friday night. Love that about Georgia high school football.
Also, too, the different traditions and atmospheres of seeing all the high schools and what they do. I get to vicariously live through everyone else's experiences. And there are certain places that it just means more there. You can tell. I've always said that with Marietta High School, they could be 10-0 or 0-10. They're going to sell out every game and they're going to tailgate all day. And then you've got the Granite Bowl at Elbert County. So the traditions are what make it so special. And like you said, Cody, even if you've been graduated for 20 years, the community is always going to show out. And I feel like nobody does high school football like the state of Georgia.
Randy Payne checking in says, eat off the floor in 2024. Go Dogs from Tifton. Talking about great high school football towns. Tift County Blue Devils. Shout out to him. Appreciate it. David West, hot in upstate South Carolina, he says, saw a robin pull a worm out of the ground with a pot holder. Yeah, it is that kind of hot. Dog days of summer for sure. And then Scott Harris on DawgNation.com saying his son playing high school football this year couldn't practice because of a heat index. We were doing two-a-days all August, and that's so true. Two-a-days are all but gone nowadays. And as I was at that Manchester practice there, it's all about the wet bulb at all these practices now. They've got to know what the humidity is, and that affects if you can practice or not. So they couldn't even have full pads on at the one practice they were having at Manchester last week because the wet bulb said it was too humid.
It's amazing, too. A lot of these places have indoor practice facilities now. A lot of the bigger programs, I know Carrollton, Gainesville, even Rome, they have indoor practice facilities. So the heat index doesn't matter. They can keep practicing year round. And that's just beyond me that these programs have the funding and the support to have those types of state-of-the-art facilities.
Yeah, that just shows you how important high school football is. All right, Kaylee, we got to start wrapping this thing up. I know you guys have a ceremony going on inside, so I appreciate you stepping in, pinch hitting for old BA today.
Hey, anytime BA is willing to give me the mic, I'm going to take it. But he's actually got the mic in the big room right now. He's hosting the luncheon, so he's got a much more difficult job than I do right now.
All right, well, we appreciate you guys joining us on the R.S. Andrews Cool Down. I think that's going to do it for Kaylee and me. It is DawgNation Daily, presented today by Pella Windows and Doors of Georgia. We'll see you right back here tomorrow.